By the time Christine Ross reached the gilt doors at St. James's, her stepmother had already leaned close enough for the scent of amber and vinegar to make her eyes sting. "Stand straight," Lady Ross whispered from the corner of her painted mouth, "and do not look hungry." Christine stood straighter. She had long practice in obeying instructions that were not truly instructions at all, but punishments shaped like etiquette. At 22, she had discovered that plainness could be useful to other people. Women called her plain when they wanted to feel beautiful. Men called her plain when they wanted permission not to see her. Dark hair pinned with old pearls that were not hers. Pale skin that looked nearly translucent in candlelight. A mouth better fitted for silence than smiles. She had been described over and over as if she were furniture, useful, unremarkable, presentable from a distance. Tonight she wore borrowed satin, dyed a weak cream that made her look like a shadow beside Lady Ross's peacock blue silk. The gown had belonged to a cousin who had grown broader in the shoulders after childbirth. It had been altered for Christine by a maid who did as she was told and no more, and the seams tugged if she breathed too deeply. Lady Ross had watched those alterations with keen satisfaction. "As my companion," her stepmother had said that morning, while Christine fastened someone else's bracelets around someone else's wrists, "you will remember your place." Companion. The word meant she escorted Lady Ross, fetched shawls, remembered names, copied invitations, soothed headaches, and stood behind chairs for hours without being asked if she had eaten. It did not mean wages. It did not mean choice. It did not mean daughter, though Christine had entered the Ross household at 13, with her father's hand warm around hers, and a legal portion set aside in papers everyone pretended had become inconveniently vague after his death. The Ross townhouse in Hanover Square had once been his. Every carved banister, every stubborn window latch, every shelf in the library he had built room by room. Christine still dusted those shelves now, careful not to smudge gilt titles she had memorized. She knew where the rain came in above the east corridor. She knew which tenants had paid their rents late because the wheat failed in Hertfordshire. She knew, because no one imagined she was listening, that Lady Ross owed money to men who smiled with all their teeth and never bowed twice. Inside the palace, light spilled in sheets over polished floors. Courtiers moved like a field of bright birds, jewelled and rustling and alert to any weakness. Christine took Lady Ross's fan when commanded, returned it when commanded, and remained 3 paces behind, while introductions floated around her head like ribbon curls. "Lady Ross! Enchanting!" "Miss Ross?" someone asked once, glancing past Lady Ross and away again. Christine keeps me organised," Lady Ross said, with a little laugh that made listeners complicit. "A most diligent creature." A creature. Christine lowered her gaze so no one would see the sharp intelligence in it. That, too, had become habit. She had learned to keep her thoughts where no one could tax them. She measured rooms as if they were ledgers. This duke owed courtesy to that viscount. That countess had borrowed diamonds 2 grand for her husband's income. This widow had sold an estate quietly and was pretending otherwise. She remembered figures the way other girls remembered dance steps. By candlelight, in the small room under the eaves assigned to her and the trunks Lady Ross would not store elsewhere, Christine copied legal clauses into a notebook she hid in a hollow Bible cover. Trust language, settlements, the precise weight of words like issue, entail, remainder, forfeiture. Her father had taught her that numbers were honest even when people were not. A trumpet sounded. Movement swelled toward the long gallery. "Do not drift," Lady Ross murmured without turning. "I never do," Christine said softly. She did not drift. She observed. She folded herself smaller when men in orders crossed too near. She kept her chin level and her shoulders back, and her expression blank enough to satisfy her stepmother's standards without inviting conversation. Shame still rose sometimes, hot and dizzy, when she caught her reflection and saw how carefully she had been reduced. But shame was a private luxury. She had work to do later, and she preserved her energy the way misers preserve coin. Near the central alcove stood a marble plinth topped by an urn, heavy with winter greenery. A line of pages and footmen in livery threaded between guests, carrying trays of wine. A boy no older than 10, narrow-faced and solemn with concentration, tried to navigate around a knot of laughing gentlemen. Christine saw the danger half a second before it happened. A heel turned, a droplet of wine struck polished stone, the boy's boot slid. He went down hard, the tray crashed, crystal burst. The child's temple struck the corner of the plinth with a sickening sound that cut clean through music and conversation. Red spread instantly across white skin. There was a collective intake of breath, the court's reflex at disorder. Then recoil, not from pain, but from blood. Christine was moving before she understood she had moved. One moment she stood behind Lady Ross's shoulder. The next she was on her knees, skirts pooling in spilled claret and shattered glass. She snatched off one glove with her teeth, pressed the folded silk hard against the wound and said, "Look at me, stay awake. Good boy, stay with me." The child whimpered. His lashes fluttered. "Someone fetch the surgeon," she snapped, and because urgency sounded like authority if spoken quickly enough, 2 men turned and obeyed. "Christine!" Lady Ross hissed from somewhere above, aghast. "Stand up, this instant!" "Not yet." Blood warmed her palm. She adjusted pressure, angled the boy's head, checked his pupils as her father once taught her, after a carriage mishap in Sussex. Around them murmurs rose, disapproval, fascination, calculation. A woman tittered, "How very dramatic!" and another whispered, "Whose girl is she?" When a physician in court black hurried forward, Christine yielded space, giving a concise account of what she had seen. No seizure, no loss, longer than a few breaths. Her voice did not shake until after she stood. As she rose, pain lanced her side. The weakened seam of her borrowed gown gave way with an audible rip from hip to rib. Cold air hit skin. Gasps fluttered nearby. She caught the fabric with her hand, but the movement dislodged something hidden in the bodice lining. A folded paper, thin from years of refolding, sealed once in dark wax, now cracked and faint. It slipped halfway out, hanging against the torn satin for one suspended, disastrous second. Christine knew that paper by touch. Her father's last signed note regarding her portion and settlement, written in his own slanted hand when fever had already hollowed his cheeks. She had kept it stitched into whatever gown she wore to formal events, because her room could be searched, her boxes opened, her drawers rearranged by maids loyal to Lady Ross. On her body, at least, it remained hers. Now half the court could see it. Before she could shove it back, a tall figure detached from the crowd and crossed the space with a speed that seemed almost indecent in so controlled a room. The Duke of Ashbourne did not ask permission. He removed his evening coat, black, superfine, lined in dark silk, and set it around her shoulders, draping it wide enough to conceal torn seams, stained skirts, and the dangerous edge of folded paper. The warmth struck her an instant later. Not needed, not requested. She was not cold. Their eyes met just once. His face gave nothing away. No gallantry, no flirtation, no performance. Grey eyes, steady as banked steel. Then he stepped back, as if all he had done was pass a lady a dropped handkerchief, but the room had already understood. A duke did not wrap his own coat around an unmarried woman in front of half the court unless he wished to make a statement, or to prevent one. Either way, it was now a story, and stories in London travelled faster than plague. Lady Ross arrived at Christine's elbow with a smile stretched too thin. "How fortunate!" she said brightly to no one and everyone. "My stepdaughter is forever overzealous. Your Grace, you are excessively kind." Ashbourne inclined his head. "I dislike preventable spectacles, Lady Ross." "Indeed!" Her fingers bit into Christine's arm through the coat sleeve. "Come, child." Child? At 22. Christine allowed herself to be steered away. Ashbourne's coat heavy across her shoulders like a public proclamation written in cloth. Behind her, whispers snapped and multiplied. "Did you see? Good God, in plain sight. Perhaps she is not so plain after all." By the time their carriage reached Hanover Square, Christine could feel tomorrow assembling itself against her. Morning proved her correct. By 10 o'clock, a footman brought in 2 newspapers and 3 handwritten notes from concerned friends. Lady Ross read all 5 at breakfast, lips tightening with each line, then dropped them beside Christine's untouched tea. "Read," she said. Christine did. The Morning Register implied she had fainted into masculine assistance after an emotional disturbance. A scandal sheet with fewer qualms was blunter. "The Ashbourne coat affair. Who is Miss R?" One note from a lady Christine had met twice advised discreetly that a girl in your delicate position should accept protection wherever it is offered. Another asked whether congratulations were premature. Congratulations? On what? Ruin, bargain, ownership. Lady Ross took the papers back, folded them precisely, and smiled with too many teeth. "You have managed in one evening to make yourself expensive. I stopped a child from bleeding to death on marble. You made yourself visible." Lady Ross's tone hardened. "Do you have any idea what that costs?" Christine said nothing. Silence had protected her often enough. But Lady Ross was not done. "There is a practical solution," she said. "Lord Felbridge dines tomorrow. You will be agreeable." The name landed like a stone in still water. Lord Felbridge, widower 60 if he was a day, gouty, rich in acreage and poor in restraint. He had once pinched Christine's wrist at supper and called her quiet stock. "I will not marry Lord Felbridge," Christine said. Lady Ross laughed, soft, pitying, lethal. "My dear, this is not a parlour debate. Felbridge is prepared to settle certain notes presently inconveniencing this family. In return, he asks a competent wife without expensive opinions. You are perfectly suited." "I am not for sale." "Everything is for sale. The only question is price." Lady Ross leaned in. "Do not mistake yesterday's pantomime for power. A coat is cloth, not contract." By noon, callers began arriving by accident. 2 ladies with sharpened sympathy, a cousin who spoke loudly about romantic misunderstandings, a gentleman who let his gaze linger on Christine as if she were newly appraised property. Lady Ross played gracious hostess, each laugh a thread in a net tightening around Christine's throat. At 4, a card arrived on heavy cream stock bearing only a name embossed in sober lettering, Ashbourne, and beneath it, in a different hand, Mr. Elias Trent, solicitor, Lincoln's Inn. Lady Ross frowned. "What nonsense is this?" "For me, perhaps," Christine said. "Nothing comes to this house for you that is not first mine." She turned the card over, found no invitation to flirtation, no sentimental line, and finally tossed it onto the table with contempt. If His Grace imagines he may tidy scandal with legal posturing, he mistakes his audience. After she left the room, Christine slipped the card into her sleeve. She met Mr. Trent the next morning in the back pew of St. George's, while Lady Ross believed she was calling on a seamstress. Trent was neat, dry, and brisk, with ink on one cuff, and the manner of a man who trusted documents over faces. "Miss Ross," he said quietly, "His Grace asked me to deliver a caution." Christine held still. Several signatures on trust papers administered by Lady Ross do not match older exemplars, including those connected with your late father's settlement. The pews seemed to tilt beneath her. "I beg your pardon." He withdrew a folded copy, not the original, and pointed with a gloved finger. "This is your father's acknowledged signature from a lease renewal 8 years ago. Here, a later transfer concerning your portion. Different formation of the R, inconsistent pressure, altered tail on the final S. Possibly clerical variance? Possibly not. Forgery. Alleged forgery, Miss Ross, until proven." He paused. "His Grace suggests you do not sign anything, however small, without independent counsel. Why would the Duke of Ashbourne involve himself in her affairs?" Gratitude for a boy in livery did not extend to chancery warnings. Yet his intervention at court had not felt impulsive. It had felt deliberate. "What does he want?" she asked. Mr. Trent's expression did not shift. "He wants fewer people ruined by bad paper." When she returned home, Lady Ross was waiting in the morning room with Lord Felbridge himself. He rose with effort, rings flashing, breath scented with brandy, though it was not yet luncheon. "Miss Christine," he said, smiling in a way that made her skin crawl, "your charming mother tells me you are shy." "Stepmother," Christine corrected before she could stop herself. Lady Ross's gaze flashed warning. Felbridge chuckled. "Spirit excellent in private, if contained." "Contained?" He took her hand without asking, and squeezed. She thought of signatures that were not signatures, tenant funds vanishing, children in draughty cottages eating thin broth, while gentlemen settled debts over cards and women. At dinner that night, Lady Ross spoke of trousseau. At breakfast she discussed dates. By afternoon she had the vicar's wife happen by with congratulations and lace samples. Every hour narrowed the corridor around Christine's choices. If she yielded, Felbridge would acquire legal authority over her person and whatever remained of her inheritance. If she resisted privately, Lady Ross would isolate her, declare her unstable, perhaps have her signed into some quiet country arrangement where inconvenient women were sent and forgotten. If she fled, she would be penniless and discredited before she reached the city gates. And beneath it all ran the deeper theft. Papers altered, funds moved, names used as masks. Not only hers. She had seen too many rent ledgers, too many delayed repairs, too many widows pleading extensions that should have been granted. Money taken from estates did not vanish into air. It vanished from roofs, from medicine, from winter coal. That evening, Christine went to the attic room under the eaves and shut the door. She took out her hidden notebook, laid Mr. Trent's copied signatures beside her father's old letter, and began listing every date she could remember when Lady Ross had demanded she copy documents but forbidden her to keep drafts. Her hand steadied as she wrote. Below, the house creaked with familiar sounds. Distant laughter from Lady Ross's salon, a maid carrying hot water, carriage wheels rattling over cobbles. A life proceeding as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed in a gallery at St. James's. The moment a seam split and a paper showed and a duke covered her with his coat before the entire court. She had not been cold. By midnight she had 3 pages of names, sums, and irregular transfers. Not proof yet, but pattern. And pattern could be followed. Christine set down her pen, flexed aching fingers, and looked at the coat folded over the back of her chair where she had hidden it from curious servants until it might be discreetly returned. Not rescue, she told herself, opportunity. Tomorrow Lady Ross would press harder. Felbridge would expect gratitude. Society would feast on scandal and call it justice. Let them. For the first time in years, Christine did not feel merely cornered. She felt dangerous. The knock came before dawn had fully lifted from the chimneys. "Miss Christine," it was Molly, one of the younger housemaids, voice threaded with nerves. "Her ladyship asks that you come down at once. Lord Felbridge is here, and Mr. Pritchard from the solicitor's chambers." Of course he was. Christine slid her notebook beneath a loose floorboard, folded Ashbourne's coat into a plain linen wrapper, and forced her face into composure before opening the door. "Thank you, Molly." In the breakfast room, a fire burned too hot for the hour. Lady Ross sat upright at the head of the table in morning silk, the colour of bruised plums, pearls at her throat like little teeth. Lord Felbridge occupied the chair nearest Christine's place, as if proximity were already right. Beside him sat a narrow man with legal whiskers and a portfolio case, Mr. Pritchard, who had drawn up enough marriage settlements to speak of women as transferable interests. "My dear," Lady Ross said, all sweetness for witnesses, "you are late." "It is not yet 8? Then let us say you are reluctant." Lady Ross gestured to the empty chair. "Sit. We have practical matters to secure." Christine remained standing. "What practical matters?" Felbridge gave an indulgent sigh. "No need for nerves, girl. We formalise intentions, that is all." Mr. Pritchard unclasped his case and laid out papers, weighted by a silver knife. "Draft articles, Miss Ross. Preliminary only. If you please, your signature acknowledging receipt." Acknowledging receipt. A harmless phrase designed to become a trap by afternoon. Christine looked from one face to the next, counting angles. Lady Ross had not summoned her privately. She wanted spectators. Witnesses to compliance. If Christine balked, witnesses to ingratitude. Very well. She moved closer, scanned the first page without touching it. Felbridge's name, Lady Ross's. A clause assigning administration of any dowry currently in dispute to the husband pending resolution. Another granting authority over household effects, correspondence and personal accounts, not marriage terms, acquisition terms. "I will not sign," Christine said. Silence dropped, thick as wool. Lady Ross gave a tiny laugh. "Childishness does not become you." Christine kept her eyes on Mr. Pritchard. "As a matter of law, I decline to acknowledge documents prepared in anticipation of a contract to which I have not consented." Felbridge flushed. "You have consented by your family's acceptance." "I am the party to be married, my lord. My consent is not transferable." Mr. Pritchard shifted, uncomfortable. Lady Ross's voice sharpened. "Do not perform legal mimicry at me, Christine." "It is not mimicry." Christine folded her hands before her, so no one could see that her fingers trembled. "And since we are discussing documents, perhaps Mr. Pritchard can advise whether signatures that materially differ from prior exemplars require review before any new settlements are advanced." Pritchard blinked. "I beg your pardon?" Lady Ross rose so quickly her chair scraped. "You ungrateful little fool." Felbridge stood more slowly, jaw set. "Lady Ross, perhaps Miss Christine is overwrought by recent attention. We might allow her time to remember herself." Christine turned to him at last. "I remember myself perfectly, Lord Felbridge. That is the difficulty." He stared, not accustomed to being denied in complete sentences. Lady Ross's smile returned, brittle as thin ice. "Mr. Pritchard, you see what I endure. Her nerves have been unsettled since that vulgar incident at court. We shall proceed when she is calmer." "No," Christine said, and this time she pitched her voice to carry to the doorway where 2 footmen hovered, pretending not to listen. "You shall not proceed. There will be no engagement." Felbridge's mouth flattened into something mean. "Take care, girl. Reputation is fragile." "So is paper," Christine said. He left without bowing. Lady Ross waited until the outer door shut, then crossed the room and struck Christine across the face. The blow was not hard enough to knock her down. It was hard enough to ring in her ears. "You will repair this," Lady Ross hissed. "Do you hear me? You will write to Felbridge by noon with apology." "No!" Another slap, this one open-palmed and calculated. "You forget whose roof shelters you." Christine tasted blood where her teeth had caught her lip. "No, I remember whose roof it was." For one dangerous second, Lady Ross looked as though she might strike her again, then mastered herself. "Very well, lock her room," she told the footman in the doorway. "No callers, no correspondence without my inspection. If she attempts to leave, send for Dr. Haviland. He has treated delicate female constitutions before. Delicate constitutions, quiet country arrangements." Christine felt a pulse of cold go through her. Not fear exactly, but clarity. She curtsied, small and perfect, and said, "As you wish, Lady Ross." By noon she had bribed Molly with the silver hairpin her mother had left her and sent a folded note through the newsboy to Lincoln's Inn. Pressed to sign, refused. Threat of medical confinement. Require counsel. CR. At 2, a reply came by way of the coal merchant's invoice book, tucked between bills as if it were nothing. 3 o'clock. Rear entrance, Ashbourne House. Bring any records in your hand. E.T. Lady Ross had posted a maid outside Christine's door, but maids needed tea, and maids loved gossip. When the tray arrived downstairs and the hall emptied for 6 blessed minutes, Christine slipped through the service stair, cloak over plain wool dress, bonnet tied low. No one stopped her until she reached the side gate. By then she was already in a hackney, heart pounding against her stays. Ashbourne House on Grosvenor Square looked like restraint-made stone. No flaunting statuary, no painted excess, just severe lines, clean windows, and the impression that every hinge had been oiled by someone who believed disorder was a moral failing. Mr. Trent met her in a narrow passage and led her not to a drawing-room but to a counting chamber behind the library, where 2 clerks stood over ledgers and a woman in steward's black-sorted rent rolls with military efficiency. "Miss Ross," Trent said, "this is Mrs. Givens, estate steward to His Grace." Mrs. Givens gave Christine one assessing glance and handed her a sheaf of figures. "If you can read hands as quickly as Mr. Trent claims, start there. We have 6 years of Ross tenant receipts copied against broker disbursements that do not reconcile. No tea, no sympathy, work." Christine sat. Numbers steadied her like prayer. Columns of rents due, rents marked paid, transfers through Belling and Crow brokerage, maintenance funds deferred, parish relief allowances reduced by half in winter quarters, where they should have risen. On another page, Ashbourne cottages in 2 villages showed similar leakages, small enough each quarter to pass unnoticed, large enough over years to gut roofs, roads, schools. "Same broker handles both estates?" Christine asked. Trent nodded. "Belling and Crow administers certain trusts for Lady Ross and several investment pools for His Grace. Separate accounts, allegedly." "Allegedly?" Christine repeated. As the hours blurred, the pattern sharpened. Transfers labelled as repairs moved into temporary holding accounts, then out again against promissory notes tied to gaming debts. Names repeated: Felbridge's agent, a Reverend Pike, trustee for an orphan subscription, 3 shell entities with respectable titles and no visible assets. When she lifted her head, Ashbourne himself stood in the doorway, coatless, sleeves plain, expression unreadable. "Miss Ross," he said. "Your Grace." He stepped in, glanced at the spread of ledgers. "You should not have had to come under these conditions." "No," she said, surprising herself with the bluntness. "But I am glad I did." A flicker, almost approval, crossed his face and vanished. "Can you testify to the Ross handwriting in these household copies?" "I copied some under instruction, not all." "Could you identify which are yours?" "Yes." He nodded once. "Then we proceed carefully." No flirtation, no softening, only precision. She ought to have been relieved. Instead, she felt oddly off balance, as if she had prepared to fend off one kind of danger and found another kind entirely. The danger of being treated as capable and expected to prove it. When dusk bled across the square, Mrs. Givens pressed a parcel of bread and cheese into Christine's hand like ammunition. "Eat in the carriage. Thinking runs poorly on air." "I have no carriage," Christine said. "You have mine," came Ashbourne's voice from behind her. "Trent will see you home by a route less visible." Christine hesitated. "If Lady Ross knows where I've been—" "She already suspects. Better she suspects correctly than imagines you helpless." In the carriage, Trent gave her a list of names to observe in her own house: stewards, clerks, visiting agents, anyone requesting signatures or old correspondence. "Do not confront. Record dates, times, exact words, if possible." Christine tucked the list into her glove. "And if she tries to call a physician, send for me immediately." By the next evening, London had acquired a new theory. Not that Christine was Ashbourne's mistress, but that she had set a trap for him, and now blackmailed Lady Ross to secure a duchess's coronet. The variations multiplied with each salon. Lady Hartwell told one room Christine had wept at Ashbourne's feet. Lady Stanhope swore she had seen secret letters sealed with black wax. A gentleman at White's declared Felbridge had heroically withdrawn from an unsuitable match to spare the girl further embarrassment. No one asked Christine. At home, retaliation came in silks and smiles. Lady Ross invited half a dozen callers for tea and compelled Christine to preside at the urn as if nothing had ruptured. She praised Christine's imagination, lamented nervous episodes, and in one carefully audible aside told Lady Pembroke, "Poor dear, she reads too many legal pamphlets and mistakes herself for counsel." Laughter, soft and cruel. Christine poured tea without spilling. "Sugar, Lady Pembroke?" "2 lumps, if you please." "As many as you can hold," Lady Ross murmured. That night Christine found her attic room disturbed. Drawers refolded too neatly, mattress shifted. Floorboard near her notebook, scratched where someone had tested it and failed. The linen wrapper containing Ashbourne's coat had been moved from chair to trunk and back again with false casualness. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed through the tremor in her hands. They were searching now, not for impropriety, but for paper. The following morning, Felbridge's man delivered a letter threatening civil action for injury to reputation and costs incurred in expectation of marriage. Lady Ross read it aloud with relish. "You see," she said, "your obstinacy exposes us all. Sign a statement that you misunderstood his lordship's honourable intentions, and this unpleasantness evaporates." Christine looked at the letterhead. Belling and Crow appeared in tiny print along the bottom as financial guarantor. "Interesting choice of guarantor," she said. Lady Ross's gaze sharpened. "Do not be impertinent." "Then do not mistake me for ignorant." For that she lost the privilege of meals with the household. Trays were sent up cold. Her writing desk vanished. The maid outside her door was replaced by a footman who did not smile. Still she wrote, on scraps, in margins, inside an old devotional book where blank leaves remained at the back. Names, times, visitors, Mr. Hale from Belling and Crow, 11:20, admitted to Lady Ross's morning room, departed with a packet-sealed green. Dr. Haviland called socially, spoke with Lady Ross 40 minutes, looked up toward attic stair twice. On the third day, Trent sent word. Evidence expanding. Need direct chain to diverted charities. His Grace requests your memory of orphan subscriptions administered after your father's death. Orphan subscriptions. A door in her mind opened onto an old memory. Her father at the library table, sleeves rolled, saying, "If money is held in trust for children, Chrissy, you treat each pound as if it were bread. Never play games with bread." After his death, Lady Ross had continued the annual subscriptions publicly. Widows praised her generosity, but the amounts in village accounts had dwindled. Christine wrote back, "Check Ross Memorial Fund, years 1 to 6 posthumous. Trustee names altered year 3. Broker likely same." The reply came within hours. "Come tomorrow. Library, after dusk. Urgent." Rain sheeted against Ashbourne House, windows when she arrived by the rear mews. Trent met her with a lantern and brought her through quiet corridors to the great library, a room of dark wood, high ladders, and the smell of leather warmed by banked coals. Ashbourne stood at a central table covered in opened ledgers, abstracts, and correspondence tied in faded ribbon. Mrs. Givens was there as well, spectacles low on her nose, stabbing at entries with ruthless patience. "No one leaves until we close this chain," she said by way of greeting. For 3 hours they worked in near silence, broken only by page turns and exact questions. "Miss Ross, this hand?" "Mine." "And this endorsement?" "Not mine. Possibly copied from an older sample." "Date conflict here. Same funds dispersed twice. Different beneficiaries." At last, Christine reached for a thin vellum folio, marked Ross Memorial Orphans Subscription, Trust Abstracts, and felt a jolt go through her body as if the paper itself were charged. "Here," she said. "Look here." Year 3 showed a transfer from the Orphan Fund into a temporary instrument under Belling and Crow, allegedly to maximise yield. Year 4 reflected reduced disbursement due to market correction, but stapled behind Year 4 was an internal note, careless, unsigned, directing excess into collateral against LR marital settlement liabilities, and referencing collateralisation with a private marriage contract held for Lord Felbridge's office. "They used orphan money," Christine said, voice gone thin, "to service debt tied to my marriage contract." Mrs. Givens muttered something unprintable. Trent exhaled slowly. "That connects coercion, embezzlement, and the proposed union." Ashbourne did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was quieter than she had yet heard it. "There is more you should know." Christine looked up. He took a folded paper from an inner pocket. Old, creased at identical angles to the letter she kept hidden against her skin, and set it on the table between them. She recognised her father's hand instantly. "I recognised your document when your gown tore at St. James's," he said. "Not from curiosity, from memory. Your father showed me a matching memorandum 12 years ago." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because my younger brother had put his name to notes he could not honour. Debtor's prison was 3 days away. Your father advanced funds quietly and refused public acknowledgement. In return, he extracted one promise from me, that if ever his daughter's settlement was threatened by fraud or coercion, I would ensure she had legal protection before anyone could force her hand." Christine felt the room tilt, then right itself. "All this time," she said, "you knew—" "I knew he feared opportunists, not specifically Lady Ross. I did not know the scale until Trent's review began. When I saw your paper exposed in that gallery, with half the court watching and your stepmother reaching for you, I chose the fastest shield available. The coat. The coat, he said. Not possession. Cover. Something in her chest, tight for years, loosened and hurt as it did. She had built entire walls of anger around that moment. At him, at gossip, at being made symbol instead of person. Now the symbol shifted. You might have told me sooner. Yes, he said, and did not defend himself. I misjudged how little time we had. Rain battered the panes. Firelight jumped across rows of figures that now looked less like numbers and more like testimony. Trent cleared his throat. Given this, we can file for injunctions and pursue Chancery quietly. No, Christine said. 3 heads turned toward her. Quietly had been the method all along. Quiet signatures, quiet transfers, quiet sales of women and futures and bread. Quiet favoured the practised liar. Lady Ross had already sent invitations for Lady Danbury's musical on Friday. Christine had seen the list herself while carrying correspondence. She had heard her stepmother tell Lady Pembroke, in honeyed tones, "We shall make a little announcement then, if Christine behaves." Christine placed her palm flat over the orphan abstract, as if taking an oath. "She means to announce the engagement publicly," Christine said, "at Lady Danbury's. She expects me to stand beside Felbridge and smile while she seals this with witnesses." Ashbourne's expression hardened. "Then we prevent the announcement." "We do better." Christine met his gaze and held it. "We let her begin. Then I demand an accounting in front of the same witnesses she intended to use against me." Trent looked alarmed. "Miss Ross, that would be theatrical?" "That would be legible," she said, "to the only audience that has pretended not to see." Mrs. Givens's mouth twitched, almost a grin. Christine went on, each word steadier than the last. "I will bring copies of the abstracts. The steward who keeps Ross household receipt books can be compelled to read dates and sums aloud. Your Grace can produce the matching Ashbourne discrepancies and broker links. If Lady Ross calls me hysterical, let her do it against numbers." Ashbourne watched her for a long, unreadable beat. Then he inclined his head, not as duke to dependent, but as one strategist to another. "Very well," he said. "We proceed on your plan." For the first time since the gallery at St. James's, Christine felt not shielded, not cornered, but armed. For the first time since the gallery at St. James's, Christine felt not shielded, not cornered, but armed. The feeling lasted precisely until she reached Hanover Square. 2 lanterns burned at the Ross front steps, though it was not yet 10, and the brass knocker stood flanked by men who were not household servants. One wore a constable's sash, the other carried a leather case Christine recognised with a flash of nausea. Dr. Haviland's. Lady Ross had not waited. Ashbourne stepped down from his carriage before the footman could lower the stair. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "I will not hide," Christine answered, but she moved with him. The butler opened the door too fast, as if he had been stationed there listening. In the front hall stood Lady Ross, perfect in black satin, one hand resting on Lord Felbridge's arm, as though this were an ordinary social call. Dr. Haviland hovered just behind, lips pursed in professional concern. "Christine," Lady Ross said, relief performed to the inch. "Thank heaven, we feared you had suffered one of your episodes." "My episodes?" Felbridge gave a grave little nod. "You disappeared without escort, my dear. In your present state, that is alarming." Haviland cleared his throat. "Miss Ross, I have been consulted regarding certain agitations, delusional fixations, and oppositional excitability. Temporary rest is advisable." "Rest," Christine repeated, "in one of your quiet houses, no doubt." Lady Ross's smile did not move. do not distress yourself. It is all arranged with compassion." The constable stepped forward. "I hold an order authorising medical supervision pending family review." Ashbourne extended his hand. "Show me." The constable hesitated, then surrendered the folded paper. Ashbourne scanned it, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "This is not a commitment warrant," he said. "It is a recommendation countersigned by a local justice who has not examined Miss Ross. It does not authorise removal by force tonight." Felbridge bristled. "Your Grace exceeds—" "I read," Ashbourne said, still mild. "A useful habit." Lady Ross's eyes hardened on Christine, then shifted smoothly to the Duke. "No one seeks force. We seek propriety. Christine has been unwell, influenced and encouraged into legal fantasies by persons outside her family." "Outside your control," Christine said. Lady Ross ignored her. "I have also received reports that household papers are missing. Now the true strike." Felbridge produced a document from his pocket and handed it to the constable with a flourish. "And I have filed notice of intended action for defamation and attempted extortion." The constable looked pained, but dutiful. "Miss Ross, until matters are clarified, you are requested not to destroy or remove any documents pertaining to the Ross estate." "Requested, not ordered, yet." Ashbourne returned the first paper. "Miss Ross will not be removed tonight. If Lady Ross wishes to petition formally, she may do so in open hearing tomorrow before a proper magistrate." Lady Ross's voice turned sugary. "How generous! Then tomorrow." She looked at Christine as one might look at a servant who had broken china. "You will remain in your room, locked. If you attempt flight again, this conversation becomes far less courteous." Christine met her gaze. "If you lock me in, every latch in this house becomes evidence." "Evidence requires credibility," Lady Ross said softly. "And by tomorrow no one will credit a hysterical girl who imagines herself a barrister." Felbridge added, almost pleasantly, "Lady Danbury has been informed you are indisposed. We will make the necessary announcement without taxing your nerves." There it was. The musicale weaponized, the witness room stolen from her. Ashbourne took one half-step closer to Christine. "Come," he said. Lady Ross lifted her chin. "You are taking her?" "For the night as protection against irregular process." His tone stayed cool. "I will answer for her appearance at hearing." Felbridge sputtered. "Outrageous!" "Practical," Ashbourne said. For a heartbeat, Christine thought Lady Ross might forbid it. Then calculation won. Better perhaps to let scandal grow and call it proof of depravity. "By all means," Lady Ross said at last, "take her. Tomorrow the court will appreciate your unusual solicitude." As they turned toward the door, Lady Ross's final words followed like perfume over rot. "If you fail tomorrow, Christine, you will not see another public room for years." The hearing room off Bow Street smelled of wet wool, ink, and impatience. By noon the next day, everything that could tilt against Christine had tilted. Mr. Trent stood at her side with 2 clerks and a stack of copied abstracts. Ashbourne stood behind them, a dark, vertical line of contained anger. Across the aisle, Lady Ross sat in dove-grey morning silk, veil lifted, eyes damp at strategic intervals. Felbridge beside her projected injured honour. Dr. Haviland and Mr. Pritchard were both present. So was a magistrate whose cousin, Trent whispered, had once hunted with Felbridge. The first blow landed before proceedings began. "Mr. Bellamy, Ross household steward and keeper of receipt books, failed to appear. "Delayed by illness," Pritchard announced smoothly. Trent sent a runner. The runner returned pale. Bellamy had left his lodgings at dawn with 2 trunks and no forwarding direction. Gone. Second blow. A note delivered to Trent mid-session from Lincoln's Inn. Belling & Crow's records room had suffered a boiler rupture at dawn. Several daybooks were water-damaged beyond immediate use. Conveniently, the years they needed most were among those unreadable. Third blow. Molly, the maid who had carried Christine's note, had been taken at first light on accusation of theft of a ruby brooch from Lady Ross's dressing table. She was being held for questioning and could not testify to household interference, surveillance, or orders. Christine felt each report like a rung giving way under her feet. When the magistrate called the matter, Lady Ross spoke first, not as predator but martyr. "My stepdaughter is dear to me," she said, voice trembling exactly once. "Since the unfortunate scene at court, she has become increasingly agitated, obsessed with accusations, unwilling to eat, prone to delusions of conspiracy. Unscrupulous parties, seeking advantage over family settlements, have inflamed her condition." Haviland affirmed nervous instability, fixation, and susceptibility to suggestion. Pritchard submitted drafts Christine had refused to sign as proof of irrational hostility to a suitable match. Felbridge, hand to chest, declared he had withdrawn solely for her sake. When Trent rose with forged signature comparisons and trust discrepancies, the magistrate frowned at the copies. "Where are the originals?" "Unavailable due to disappearance and possible tampering," Trent said tightly. "Then we are asked to infer criminality from papers no one can presently authenticate." Christine stepped forward before Trent could stop her. "Sir, if witnesses are disappearing and records are being destroyed, that is precisely why delay is dangerous." The magistrate looked over his spectacles. "Miss Ross, you will address the bench through counsel." "Then through counsel I state that my person and property are at immediate risk." Lady Ross dabbed her eyes. "You see, paranoia." Ashbourne moved then, asking permission to speak as interested party whose own estate accounts showed parallel irregularities tied to the same broker. The magistrate granted it with visible reluctance. Ashbourne was concise, factual, impossible to dismiss outright, but even his title could not manufacture missing originals or absent witnesses. In the end, the ruling came in the language of caution that often masked cowardice. No full commitment, no asylum, but an interim order placing Christine under Lady Ross's domestic supervision, restricting independent financial action until a chancery review could be scheduled. She was advised to avoid public agitation while her health and competence were observed. Observed, another word for caged. Trent objected, overruled. Christine stood very still while the room emptied around her. She had not been dragged to Haviland's carriage. She had not been declared mad, but the plan for Lady Danbury had been gutted. Legally, she could now be painted as unreliable if she spoke in public against family direction. Bellamy gone. Originals ruined. Molly jailed. Every thread she had woven cut in a different place. Outside, rain began again. In Ashbourne's carriage she sat opposite him, hands flat on her knees, and stared at the blurred city through glass. "I failed," she said at last. "You were obstructed." "I failed," she repeated sharper. "I asked for an open room and clear numbers. I have no steward, no originals, no servant witness, and a magistrate who just handed me back to the woman stealing from orphans." Ashbourne's voice stayed level, but she could hear strain under it. "Then we change method." "To what? Whispering in corridors while she arranges my confinement by instalments?" Christine laughed once, breathless and ugly. "Perhaps Lady Ross was right. Perhaps I do mistake myself for counsel." "Do not do that," he said. "Do what?" "Repeat her voice as if it were yours." The carriage rocked over a rut. Christine pressed her nails into her palms until pain steadied her. "She took Molly," she said quietly. "For helping me carry a note. If I keep pushing, more people will pay." Ashbourne did not answer immediately. When he did, it was almost inaudible. "People are already paying." At Ashbourne House, Mrs. Givens met them with new copies and worse news. Bellamy's bank account had received a deposit equal to 10 years' wages yesterday afternoon, bought and removed. Molly would need bail money and an advocate they could trust not to report back to Ross agents. Christine took the papers, then set them down because her hands had begun to shake in earnest. She turned away, went to the nearest window, and let one furious tear fall before she wiped it away hard. "I cannot lose now," she said to the glass. "If she wins this, it is not only me, it is every tenant account, every child's fund, every woman who can be called unstable when she says no." No one answered. They did not offer comfort because comfort would have insulted what she had named. Still, as dusk thickened, doubt settled in the hollows of her bones. Much later, when the house had quieted and Trent had gone to arrange Molly's release, Ashbourne remained in the library with the fire burned low and the old memorandum from Christine's father open on the desk. He read the same 3 lines twice without seeing them. He had built his life on control after Julian's collapse, after notes signed in bravado became chains, after discretion became complicity, after a brother's smile turned brittle behind closed doors, and then vanished into a winter fever no physician could reverse. Ashbourne had told himself that order could prevent repetition. Fewer risks, fewer confessions, fewer people admitted past the surface. Then Christine Ross had knelt in blood on palace marble and moved faster than everyone with rank. He had recognised the folded paper and acted on instinct. A shield, a promise. But promises made years ago did not account for the present cost. A young woman slandered, cornered, nearly declared unfit, because he had entered the frame and drawn fire as well as protection. A soft knock. Christine stood at the threshold, no bonnet now, hair loosened by weather, face pale with fatigue, but eyes still lit with that hard, startling focus. "I did not mean to intrude," she said. "Mrs. Givens said you were awake." He gestured her in. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ashbourne said, "I owe you truth beyond documents." She waited. "My brother forged my father once," he said. "Small amount at first, then larger. We hushed it to avoid scandal. Creditors turned to servants, tenants, anyone with weaker walls. A Carter's family was put out in January over arrears that should have been covered. The child died before spring." He looked down at his hands, as if they belonged to someone else. "I learned then that private management can be another name for cowardice." Christine's expression shifted. Shock first, then something gentler and more dangerous. Understanding. "I am asking you," he said, the words rougher than he intended, "whether my involvement now helps you or harms you. If you say step back, I will still fund counsel and protection, but I will not stand beside you publicly." She crossed the room and set her palm on the desk between them, close to his hand but not touching. "Look at me," she said. He did. "I did not ask you to rescue me," she said. "I asked you to witness with me. There is a difference. Do not abandon the difficult part because you are afraid of repeating the past." It landed clean, with no ornament. He gave a short, unsteady breath that might have been a laugh in another life. "You are very certain for someone who says she has failed." "I am terrified," she said. "Certainty is what I do with terror." For the first time in years, Ashbourne let silence hold without armouring it. "Then we proceed," he said. "Together," she answered. By morning, Lady Ross made her final move. A messenger in Danbury livery arrived with a cream card edged in gold and a note in Lady Danbury's hand, delicately phrased and absolutely clear. owing to distressing rumours and concern for Miss Ross's health, it would be best if Miss Ross did not attend tonight's musicale. Lady Ross and Lord Felbridge would speak on family matters in her stead. Exclusion formalised. 5 minutes later, a second messenger came, this one from Bow Street, with notice that a complaint had been lodged accusing Christine of unlawfully retaining property belonging to the Duke of Ashbourne, his coat and papers of private significance allegedly removed from Ross House. If she appeared at a public assembly, she could be questioned on the spot. Forgery layered atop theatre. If she stayed away, Lady Ross controlled the room. If she appeared, she risked public seizure and further proof of instability. Then came the third knife. Molly had been released on bail, but only after signing a statement she could not read and was now missing from the safe lodging Trent arranged. Vanished between carriage and door. Mrs. Givens swore softly. Trent looked as if he might shatter his pen in two. Even Ashbourne went very still. Christine read all 3 notices twice, then laid them side by side. "She is trying to split us," Trent said. "Any one of these could delay tonight. All three are meant to make delay look prudent," Christine finished. Ashbourne stepped closer. "If you go, we cannot guarantee you won't be stopped at the door." "If I do not go, she announces the engagement and frames my absence as incapacity." Christine touched the top notice with one finger. "And once that story settles, Chancery will move like treacle while people disappear." Trent frowned. "Without Bellamy, who reads the abstracts?" Christine turned to Mrs. Givens. "Who keeps duplicate rent abstracts for Ross seasonal planning?" Givens answered immediately. "Assistant steward, Thomas Reed, young, terrified of everyone." "Can he read?" "Perfectly." "Can he be found in 2 hours?" Givens's mouth went hard. "Yes," Ashbourne said. "Christine, if they attempt arrest, I can intervene only to a point." She met his gaze. "Ah, no!" The clock on the mantel struck 11, each chime a nail driven toward evening. Christine picked up the Bow Street complaint, held it over the fire, and watched the edge curl black. "Send word to Lady Danbury," she said. "Miss Ross regrets nothing and will attend." Mrs. Givens was already at the door. Trent gathered copies, sealing wax, affidavits, whatever fragments remained. Ashbourne opened the cabinet where his formal coats hung in ordered ranks, then paused and took out the one that was not there, the one folded since St. James's, waiting. He brought it to Christine without ceremony. She took it, and this time her hands did not shake. By dusk their carriage turned toward a Lady Danbury's house through a crush of lamps and gossip and rain-slick wheels, carrying too few witnesses, incomplete proofs, and a woman the law had just tried to silence. At the corner before Berkeley Square, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the road and raised their hands for the carriage to halt. At the corner before Berkeley Square, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the road and raised their hands for the carriage to halt. The horses tossed, harness bells jolting once. Ashbourne's coachman swore under his breath and pulled them up short. One officer came to the door, rain shining on his hat brim. "Your Grace, Miss Ross, by order lodged at Bow Street, we are instructed to request Miss Ross's cooperation in a complaint of unlawfully retained property." Christine already had the handle in her hand. "Read the order aloud." The officer blinked. "Miss, it is standard. Read it." People were turning to look now. Other carriages queuing for Lady Danbury's lamps, liveried footmen pausing on steps, heads at windows. Public. Good. The officer unfolded the paper with damp fingers and read, "Miss Christine Ross is requested to appear for questioning regarding possession of a gentleman's coat and associated papers alleged removed without consent." "Requested," Christine said, "not commanded." The second officer shifted. "Best if you came quietly now, miss." Christine stepped down into the wet street before anyone could stop her. Ashbourne's coat black against her pale gown, rain beading on the broad shoulders. "I will appear at Bow Street tomorrow at 10, she said clearly, "in writing with counsel. Tonight I am attending a public assembly where false statements are intended against my person and the state. If you prevent that attendance without warrant, I will name you both in open complaint for unlawful obstruction." The first officer stared at her, as if uncertain what species she was. From behind, a woman in emerald silk leaned out of her carriage window and called, delighted, "Oh, do let the girl pass, constable. We shall all die if we miss this." Laughter scattered, nervous and avid. Witnesses multiplied by the second. Ashbourne said, quiet but carrying, "I will guarantee Miss Ross's appearance at Bow Street at 10. Put my name on your report." That did it. The officers looked at one another, weighed a duke's written guarantee against a messy street scene, and stepped back. "Very good, miss. 10 o'clock. Christine inclined her head. "Thank you." She did not hurry as she crossed to Lady Danbury's steps. She felt each heartbeat in her throat, each drop of rain on her lashes, each eye following the coat. Inside, the house blazed with candlelight and violins, powder, beeswax, perfume, heat. The great drawing-room had been arranged for music, but no one was listening now. Lady Danbury stood near the hearth with the fixed smile of a hostess whose evening had escaped her control. Beside her, exactly where Christine had expected, Lady Ross held Lord Felbridge's arm and wore triumph-like jewellery. Lady Ross saw her and went still for one fractional second. Then she recovered. "Christine," she called in tones of fond reproach, "my dear child, you should not be out in this weather." A lane opened through the guests as if cut by a blade. Christine walked into it and stopped 6 feet from her stepmother. Behind her she could feel Ashbourne's presence, not touching, not directing, simply there. "I am exactly where I should be," Christine said. Felbridge gave a theatrical sigh. "Must we do this before company?" "You chose company," Christine said. "You meant witnesses. So did I." Lady Ross laughed lightly. "Poor girl, still feverish. Ladies and gentlemen, forgive us. Family nerves." "Lady Ross," Christine said, and the room quieted with a speed that felt like a door slamming. "Before you make any announcement, I request an accounting under Chancery practice of funds held in trust in my father's name, the Ross Memorial Orphans subscription, and associated estate rents transferred through Belling and Crow." A rustle moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. Lady Ross's face became pity itself. "Christine, no! Not another scene." Christine heard her own pulse, high and hard. She reached into her reticule and drew out folded abstracts, each ribbon-marked. "I have dates," she said. "I have sums. I have endorsements inconsistent with established signatures. I have diverted disbursements from orphan subscriptions collateralized against liabilities tied to a proposed marriage contract." Felbridge barked a laugh. "Absurd!" "Then let us read them." Christine turned toward the doorway. "Mr. Read?" A young man in steward's black, thin as a reed himself and white as plaster, stepped forward from behind a knot of servants. Mrs. Givens stood 3 paces behind him, like an iron post. Lady Ross's voice cracked like a whip. "Thomas, return to your place." Reed swallowed. I am in my place, my lady." Christine handed him the top abstract. "Please read line 7, year 4. His voice shook on the first words, steadied by the third. "Transfer from Ross Memorial Orphans subscription to Belling and Crow temporary instrument. Purpose listed as yield optimization. Subsequent disbursement reduced 40% due market correction. Now attached memorandum. Reed turned the page with fingers that trembled. Internal note, unsigned. Apply excess against LR marital settlement liabilities. Cross-secure with private contract held for F office. A woman near the pianoforte gave a tiny, horrified sound. Lady Ross rounded on Reed. "You thieving little liar!" "Those papers are stolen drafts." Christine spoke over her. "Year 5, line 12. Reed read another figure, then another. Rents received in full, repairs deferred. Parish coal allowance reduced. Widow stipend cancelled, then reissued in half under different initials. Felbridge surged forward. "This is extortion! I'll not be blackened by a girl who can barely keep her stays laced." Christine looked at him, and for the first time she did not feel small. "On March 12th, she said, voice level as steel, "your agent Mr. Hale received £200 from account 48-C and posted it against notes at White's under your name. On June 2nd, the same channel carried 160 from orphan funds marked temporary hold. On August 9th, you threatened civil action if I refused marriage. Shall I continue?" Felbridge's face mottled purple. Lady Ross stepped between them, eyes glittering. "Enough! You are hysterical, ungrateful, and very nearly mad. These people indulge you because scandal amuses them." A hot sting hit Christine's eyes. One tear escaped before she could stop it. She wiped it away, furious with herself, and lifted her chin. "No," she said. "They indulge silence because it protects them. I am done helping." She turned to the room. "My father left me a legal portion. Since his death, signatures were altered, trusts depleted, tenants underpaid, and charity funds diverted. I was to be sold into marriage to seal the thefts. I refuse. I request immediate magistrate intervention and seizure of original records before further destruction." Now Ashbourne moved, not in front of her, but beside her. "I corroborate Miss Ross's statement," he said. "My estate accounts show parallel discrepancies through the same broker and intermediaries. Mr. Trent has petitions prepared." "Officers are outside!" Lady Ross laughed, high and brittle. "You came armed for theatre!" Christine answered. "For truth!" At Lady Danbury's sharp nod, a footman went running. Within minutes, the same Bow Street officers who had stopped the carriage entered the drawing-room with a senior magistrate called from a nearby supper party. Wet coats, mud at hems, official seal in hand. The magistrate's gaze swept the room, the papers, the faces hungry for blood. "Who requests intervention?" Christine stepped forward. "I do, sir, in my own name." The magistrate took initial statements in Lady Danbury's library until nearly dawn. Lady Ross did not fold. She sharpened. By 2 a.m, she had produced Dr. Haviland to attest again to Christine's derangement. Mr. Pritchard to challenge every paper as inadmissible copy, and a tearful declaration that Ashbourne had manipulated an impressionable girl for leverage over brokerage disputes. Felbridge claimed the F office note referred not to him, but to a shipping firm in Falmouth. He demanded apologies. He threatened everyone. Christine sat at a narrow desk under 2 bright candles and answered every question without ornament. "Did you remove those documents from Ross House?" "I copied abstracts from records I was ordered to maintain. Originals remained in house custody until they disappeared." "Did you conceal a gentleman's coat and papers?" "I retained the Duke of Ashbourne's coat after he placed it around me publicly. His Grace has made no complaint. The Bow Street complaint is retaliatory." The magistrate checked. Ashbourne confirmed it, expression glacial. "Complaint withdrawn on record." At 4, Trent arrived with ink under his nails and a piece of news that struck like thunder. Bellamy had been found at a posting inn on the Dover Road, detained by local constables at Mrs. Givens's request after attempting to cash a large draft under an assumed name. By 6, Bellamy stood in Lady Danbury's breakfast parlour, crumpled and grey, refusing eye contact. Lady Ross watched him with absolute stillness. "Mr. Bellamy," the magistrate said, "you are reminded you may be charged. Speak plainly." Bellamy swallowed. "I was told to remove certain ledgers for safekeeping." "By whom?" A long pause, then barely audible. "Lady Ross's instruction delivered by Mr. Pritchard's clerk." Pritchard made a strangled protest. Felbridge cursed. Lady Ross did neither. She only said, very calm, "You are lying because you are weak." Bellamy flinched as if struck. "I was paid," he whispered, "by Lord Felbridge's man to leave before hearing." Felbridge exploded. "Coward! You'll hang for this and drag us with you." "Silence!" barked the magistrate. Still, Lady Ross adapted. She turned on Bellamy with icy precision. "And did I sign this payment? Did you see my hand? Or are you, as always, mistaking gossip for evidence?" Bellamy hesitated. "No written order." Of course. She had kept her own hands clean. By mid-morning they moved proceedings to Bow Street for formal depositions. Crowd at the doors. Ink, sweat, rain, waiting. Lady Ross's final escalation came there. She produced, through Haviland, a signed statement from Molly confessing theft and claiming Christine had instructed her to carry forged papers to unnamed men for payment. It was clumsy, misspelled, damning enough if believed. Trent looked sick. "If they credit this," Christine asked for the statement, read it once, twice. Then she said, "Molly cannot write." Silence. Haviland frowned. "What?" "She can sign her name with difficulty. She cannot compose this." Christine lifted the page. "Also, this uses legal phrases she has never heard. Tortious interference." "Constructive fraud." "Who dictated it?" Haviland sputtered. Lady Ross finally lost her composure. "This is tedious. Must we now centre the literacy of servants?" "Yes," Christine said, turning to the magistrate, "because illiteracy is how you stole from them." The magistrate ordered Molly produced immediately. She was found by afternoon at a charity infirmary in Suffolk, frightened and bruised but alive. When brought in, she clung to the rail and stared at the floor until Christine knelt beside her and said softly, "You are not in trouble for helping me." Molly's eyes filled. "They made me mark paper, miss. Said jail if I didn't. I told 'em I couldn't read it. Gentleman said that was the convenience." The room shifted then, not in noise but in moral weather. People who had smirked at scandal began looking at Lady Ross as if seeing the machinery behind her smile. The magistrate signed seizure orders for Belling and Crow Records, and Ross Household Originals, placed interim control of Christine's portion under Chancery protection, and referred charges of embezzlement, coercion and falsification for formal hearing. Felbridge's solicitor attempted delay, denied. Haviland withdrew into professional vagueness. Pritchard requested adjournment, denied. Lady Ross stood when officers approached. "I will not be handled," she said. "No one intends roughness, my lady," said the officer. She looked past them at Christine, eyes bright and hard as cut glass. "You think this is victory," she said quietly. "It is merely noise. Society forgets." Christine rose to her feet. "Perhaps," she said. "Records do not." Lady Ross gave a tiny, contemptuous smile. "You are your father's daughter, after all. How disappointing for those who tried to be kind." Then she let the officer take her arm. Felbridge did not wait for escort. He pushed through the crowd and vanished into rain, collar up, dignity in tatters. When the doors shut and the crush began to break, Christine stayed exactly where she was, as if movement might shatter her. Her body had gone past, trembling, into a strange hollowness. Voices blurred at the edges. Ink, damp wool, orange peel from someone's pocket. Every smell too sharp. "Miss Ross?" Trent's voice careful. "Interim orders are entered. Your rooms are no longer under Lady Ross's control. We can petition for immediate release of your father's library effects." Christine nodded, without trusting speech. Molly hovered 3 steps away in a borrowed shawl, eyes red. "I'm sorry, miss. I didn't mean—" Christine turned, crossed the space, and took both Molly's cold hands in hers. "You did nothing wrong," she said. "Do you hear me? Nothing." Molly burst into tears. Christine held on until the girl could breathe. Thomas Reed approached next, hat crushed in both hands. "Miss Ross, if they dismiss me, I understand." "They won't," Christine said. "And if they do, you come to Mrs. Givens. There is work for honest men." Reed swallowed hard and nodded. Only then did Christine look for Ashbourne. He stood near the far wall, speaking quietly with the magistrate, profile severe, one glove clenched in his hand. When he finished, he came to her, and in his face she saw relief held under discipline so tight it hurt to witness. "It is done," he said. "Not all," she answered automatically. "No, not all, but this part is done." Outside, the weather had cleared to a hard blue afternoon. Newsboys were already shouting versions of her name, some wrong, some close enough. Women who had once looked through her now looked directly at her, and then away, unsettled. As they stepped into the street, Lady Danbury herself descended from her carriage and took Christine's arm without asking. "My dear," she said in a voice meant to carry, "you will dine with me tomorrow, front room, early hour. Bring whichever papers make men uncomfortable." It was not affection, it was alignment. In London that mattered. Christine almost laughed, almost cried, did neither. At Ashbourne's carriage she paused with one hand on the door. "For months I thought survival meant being smaller," she said, half to herself. Ashbourne answered, "Today disproved that." She got in. This time, when the wheels began to turn, she did not feel chased. She felt the first awkward, astonishing edge of space. The Chancery ruling came in a crowded courtroom 6 weeks later, and this time there were originals. Ledger by ledger, seal by seal, witness by witness, the scheme held. Lady Ross's direct hand appeared less often than her will, but enough. Authorisations routed through clerks, correspondence tied to recovered packets from Bellamy's trunks, brokerage instructions cross-referenced with Felbridge's notes. The court ordered restitution. Christine's dowry restored in full, Ross tenant shortages repaid from attached assets, orphan subscriptions reconstituted under independent trustees, control of the Hanover Square house divided according to her father's settlement with a controlling share vested in Christine. Lady Ross, spared prison by rank and negotiation, was ordered to reside in Bath under supervision pending final civil accounting, with travel restrictions and monitored expenditures. She left the court with her spine straight and eyes burning, defeated but unbowed. Felbridge withdrew his suits, sold 2 properties to satisfy private calls, and disappeared from invitation lists as if he had never existed. That evening, long after congratulations had been endured and dismissed, Christine stood alone in the Ross Library at Hanover Square. Her father's books were back. Not all at once, and not in perfect order. Some still bore chalk marks from storage crates. One atlas smelled faintly of mildew. 3 volumes had to be rebound, but they were here. Ledgers, law commentaries, poetry he pretended not to like. She ran her fingers along the spines the way one touches a scar that has healed enough to feel. A soft knock sounded at the doorframe. Ashbourne stood there, hat in hand. No attendant. "May I come in?" he asked. She smiled faintly. You own half the square, your grace. I cannot bar you. I am not asking as duke. The air changed. Then yes, she said. He came in and shut the door behind him. For a moment they listened to the house settling around them. Distant clink from the kitchens, wind at the sash, the ordinary sounds of a place no longer hostile. I have rehearsed this badly, he said. Good, she replied. I dislike speeches polished by committee. That startled a real laugh out of him, brief and warm and almost boyish. Then he sobered. When this began, he said, I told myself I was honouring a promise to your father. Then I told myself I was correcting accounts. Both true, neither sufficient. Christine said nothing. She could hear her own breathing. I have spent years mistaking restraint for virtue, he went on. It kept people at a distance where they could not disappoint me or require anything I could fail to give. You were not interested in being kept at a distance. His mouth tightened, self-mocking. Inconveniently. I was busy not being sold, she said softly. Yes, and while you were fighting for your life, you still had room to see mine clearly. He took one step closer. I admire your mind. I trust your judgment. I care for you in ways I did not permit myself to name until the day I thought they might silence you. Christine looked down at her hands, then up again. I care for you too, but I will not exchange one cage for another, however gilded. You never will, his voice roughened. If you choose me, it must be as partner. Your property remains yours. Your work remains yours. I would ask your counsel in my estate governance formally, not as favour. And if you disagree with me in public, I will survive it. She lifted a brow. Will you? I will learn quickly. There was a long, bright silence. Christine, he said, and now there was no title in it at all, only her name. Will you marry me? She felt the question travel through everything that had brought them here. Marble floors and blood, torn satin, whispered cruelty, nights of ink and fear, rooms where she had chosen to speak, not refuge, she reminded herself. Choice. Yes, she said, on terms. He almost smiled. I would be disappointed otherwise. First, separate legal identity preserved in settlement. Done. Second, estate schools and tenant accounts under my management with authority to audit brokers. Agreed. Third, no medical man enters my household on a woman's complaint of nerves unless the woman requests him herself. Something broke open in his expression, grief and tenderness braided tight. It shall be so, he said quietly. She stepped forward then, close enough to see the silver at his temples, the fatigue under his eyes, the steadiness he offered without demand. I have one term for you, she added. You may stop apologizing for caring. His breath caught. That one may take practice. I am very patient, she said. He reached up, touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, as if asking once more. She leaned into it. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, then less careful, years of restraint giving way by increments. When they parted, both were smiling in startled disbelief. Tomorrow, he said, we tell Trent and Mrs. Givens before the newspapers learn to spell romance. Tomorrow, she agreed. He glanced toward the chair by her desk where the black coat lay folded. I should reclaim that, perhaps. She shook her head. No, it stays. As evidence? As history, she said. Different thing. Their wedding took place in the small chapel at Ashbourne's country seat on a grey morning that smelled of wet grass and lilac. No trumpets, no crush of spectators. Lady Danbury came in plum silk and pretended not to cry. Mrs. Givens stood like a general in her best black bombazine. Trent fumbled the ring once and muttered legal Latin under his breath. Molly, scrubbed pink and radiant in a new blue dress, held Christine's gloves with fierce ceremony and did not let go until the last possible moment. Afterward, in the breakfast room, Lady Danbury lifted her glass. "To Mrs. Ashbourne," she declared. "May she terrify every dishonest steward from here to Yorkshire." "Hear, hear," said half the room. Christine laughed, flushed, alive. "Mrs. Ashbourne," Molly whispered later, testing it. "Christine," she corrected gently. "In this house, at least between us." Molly grinned. By afternoon, Christine sat at a long oak table with Mrs. Givens and 2 village schoolmistresses, sleeves rolled, ink on her fingers, arguing over slate budgets and winter boot allowances. 3 pairs per child is impossible, said one mistress. 2 pairs and a repair fund, Christine countered, and we buy wool in bulk before October rises. From the window she could see tenants crossing the yard to the new accounts office. A plain room, open door, posted rates, no whispered favours. Ashbourne appeared in the doorway and leaned there unnoticed for a moment, watching her command the table with calm authority. When she looked up, he said, "Am I interrupting policy?" "Only if you object to arithmetic." "I have surrendered," he said, "utterly." That evening a letter arrived from Bath in Lady Ross's unmistakable hand, the script still elegant, the tone still edged. Christine read it once by the fire, folded it, and placed it in a drawer labelled Legal. No shiver, no shame. Record. Later she walked through the quiet house to her study. On the desk lay school plans, tenant petitions, a draft charter for the reconstituted orphan fund, and one folded black coat. She touched the sleeve lightly, then sat and took up her pen. Outside, rain began, soft against the panes. Inside, she wrote her name at the bottom of the page, clear, deliberate, entirely her own.